We need something of ourselves left over to have joy. We need to feel safe in our bodies and in who we are to be able to tap into the good things around us. If we are frazzled and burnt out from giving ourselves away to earn acceptance and a sense of worth, we can't rationalize anxious thoughts as well because that takes energy. We can't rest as well. You have to have a little bit of resource to be able to rest well. Otherwise, you're just in fight or flight, you're just frazzled, and that doesn't really find us giving way to rest that easily.
Anna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
What is self-worth and where does it come from?
Oh gosh, self-worth is, I think, the value that we apply to ourselves is that, and in the entirety of who we are, really, both all the different parts of ourselves that we outwardly show, but also the stripped back, deep, dark depths, the bones of who we are. How much value do we apply to who we are as a person, regardless of what we do or how much we produce? How valuable do we feel we are? That's what I think it is. And actually, the answer to that question dictates so much. Dictates how we treat ourselves, the habits and the behaviors. It dictates what that inner dialogue sounds like. It dictates where we place our boundaries, um, how we speak out, whether we speak out, how we want people to love us, and what relationships look like to us, things that we reach for and dream of. It's just so fundamental. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you said there was it's not to do with what our output is, what
Mm.
we achieve, what we do physically in terms of what we can kind of quantify. It's that stripped backness, which is quite a frightening thought then of what you sit with when you've not done anything, you've nothing to show or
Mm.
produce for the day. It's who you are in just being.
Yeah. Yeah. What if you just had a day where you did absolutely nothing, or if you were unwell and you had a sick day, like the old school sick day, not the current modern sick day where we just work sick from a more reclined position. We try and scrape through and scrape by and show that we're still showing up into the world. But if you were to have a day or a period where you just did little to nothing, would you still believe you were deserving of kindness and care and love and nurturing? Or would you feel like you weren't deserving of those things because ultimately you have to earn those things somehow?
And I guess everybody has self-worth. It's just what worth you put against it.
Mm.
So when we have really low self-worth, i.e. meaning we don't really feel worthy of X, Y, or Z, what actually happens? What's the consequence of this?
So many things. It might mean, and I can think about this in my own life because my sense of self-worth has been all over the shop. And when I have felt just not good, like I am not a lovable person, I am not deserving, I just feel inherently just like I need to be more, like in and of myself. I'm not enough to be loved. I have to. So it might look like people pleasing. It might look like just overriding the limits of your resources to please other people to earn your way to acceptance. It might look like trying to overachieve. If I do everything at 100%, then maybe I'll feel deserving of the good things in my life. It might look like you're in a situation that you love, with people that you love, but actually you can't really access that feeling of like, oh, this is where I'm meant to be right now. I deserve this. These are the good things in my life, and being able to absorb them. Sometimes it can feel like you're kind of almost observing from the outside. It might feel like you find it really hard to do things that are nourishing and nurturing for you. Maybe you're sabotaging your own sleep. Maybe you're binging on things that just don't make you feel good. Maybe you're feeling low and you've got friends who care about you, but you just find it really hard to talk to them when you're in that place. So it might be boundaries. Actually just finding it so hard to hold a boundary in case you disappoint or upset someone. So your needs and your voice and your values, you just let them be overlooked. You just swallow them down and you just want to make yourself pleasing to people around you because ultimately you don't feel that pleasing to yourself. So it gets into everything. low self-worth, low self-esteem. And the way that I describe it in my book, Know Your Worth, because it's all about self-worth and self-esteem, is that your worth, your value is not up for debate. You have value from the moment you are born to well beyond when you die, and the impressions that you leave on people. That is an attached price. You have value, end of story. You know, your self-esteem is your relationship to that. It's how much you can access that. It's how you live that out in your life. It's your understanding of that value. And that's, you know, we can never change our value. It's fixed, but we can change our understanding of it. And that's amazing. That's what we do
Absolutely.
in therapy as well.
So there's kind of several stages, I guess. You can channel through life and trundle along and then realize, hold on, I'm putting no worth on myself, on who I am
Mm,
in being. And then there can be, okay, now I'm going to do something about that. So therefore they might come to you and say, Anna, help me. I have no self-worth. I've realized this,
mm,
but I really don't know how to change this inner dialogue, this voice that's saying I'm not good enough for this reason unless I do this thing or these things, or unless I do this massive thing that seems so unachievable that it really just has other problems, because you've got overwhelm, you've got anxiety and everything coming in from that. Where do you start with that? What's your advice to them?
Yeah, so people often come to me, and this is the place I got to as well, is like we have all these little rock bottoms where we start realizing the cost of living as if you need to earn that sense of worth. And it might look like burnout. It might look like you've given and given and given and given beyond the limits of your resources. You feel like you've given yourself away like wedges of cake and you've got crumbs. And that's it. That's all you've got left of yourself, is just the dregs. And you don't feel joy. You don't feel that joyful, because we need to feel resourced to feel joy. Even I think this is what the thing is with people pleasing, for example, and when we're trying to kind of earn our way to acceptance, it feels really altruistic. It feels like a nice character trait, right? I like pleasing people. What's wrong with that? But actually, often what we find is that people pleasing is so fear based. It is love. You know, it's fear dressed up in love. It's fear dressed up in love. It looks nice on the outside, but often there's a cost, and that cost can be overwhelm. It can be that you fill your diary up with things that other people want you to do without a question as to have you got the energy to actually do those things. It might mean saying yes to people. It might mean caring for so many people, being that go-to, but actually you feel like a burden if you've ever got something you need to talk about. It might mean that actually you don't pursue things that excite you because you just don't have anything left at the end of the day. You don't have the energy, the capacity. And it might look like anxiety, because if I think this is so important to realize, we need something of ourselves left over to have joy. We need to feel safe in our bodies and in who we are to be able to tap into the good things around us, right? Because if we are frazzled and burnt out from giving ourselves away to earn acceptance and a sense of worth, we can't rationalize anxious thoughts as well. You know, because that takes energy. We can't rest as well. Because funnily enough, you have to have a little bit of resource to be able to rest well. Otherwise, you're just in fight or flight. You're just frazzled. And that doesn't really find us giving way to rest that easily. We have to have resource and rest to laugh. I don't know about you, but if I'm frazzled, I have no sense of humor at all. Like, we need energy to be able to enjoy our lives. And I think when we are desperately trying to earn our way to feeling acceptable, not only to the world and the people around us, but to ourselves, then often we don't have enough of ourselves left. People often come to me because they say, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't actually know what I want. I don't actually know what I need or feel or fear, or just because they've been spent so much of their life kind of accommodating other people's needs and wants and making space for their thoughts and opinions, that they've kind of lost the language to express and access their own.
Yeah, when you take away that expectation or pressure of performance, then you're left with a bit of a void of, so who actually am I? What do I want to do with this this energy, this thought. And I think with the whole wellness movement, which I mean, I speak to so many different people about wellness. That's the whole purpose of this podcast is health, wellness. Under those umbrellas, we can have nutrition, we can have exercise, we can have the mental side of things, fashion, interiors, so many things that make us feel like us, the best version of ourselves, which is wellness. But such a huge caveat that I try and stress is that this is a choice that you can opt into, but it's not a rule that you need to live your life by. It's not a rule that you need to have enough protein according to these nutritional experts, or you're a failure if you don't, and that's it, your health is just off track. And it's quite an interesting thing that this overall wellness movement is really positive when done right, but it can lead to those expectations, these pressures of, I'm a healthy person and I'm identifying myself as a healthy person. Therefore, I have so many morning routine steps to jump through before I even get to 6 a.m. because, I get up at 5 a.m. because that's the kind of person I am. It can really spiral out of control. And it's not just these people who maybe are less motivated, but it can be the highly motivated people with high expectations that really fall into this pattern and this problem in a similar way.
Yeah, I think what often happens is when we don't really value the core of who we are, we start looking outwards for the things that we think we need and the things we need to do and the blueprints and the 5 steps and the this is how you should do your morning routine, and we stop listening to ourselves. We're not turning inwards and thinking, actually, what resources do I have today? What is kind and nurturing today? And my book that's out in August is called The Good Decision Diary. And in there, I talk about actually the more we get to know and value ourselves, the more well we will be. Because, for example, last week I got up at 5:45 when my husband's alarm went off, and I worked out every morning. I had a great time. I was doing weights. Then I was having a nice cold shower. Then I was, getting breakfast, and then the kids got up, and it was like, this is just amazing. This is all, but I had the energy, right? And then this week I'm hormonal. I've been waking up my husband's alarm goes off, and I'm like, no, that's just not loving for me right now to get out of bed. I'm going to stay in here. I'm going to read. And I think, back when I didn't value myself in the same way, that would have felt like failure. It would have felt like failure to think, actually, I should be doing this. I shouldn't be. Or I would have dragged myself out of bed, pushed myself to do something that actually my body didn't really want to do, and depleted myself further. So I think sometimes it's taking all of this advice and thinking, this is so wonderful and it's so well informed and it's so useful to have, but recognizing that we wake up with different resources every day. Like, we don't know really how well we slept. We don't know what our body might be fighting underneath the surface. Maybe our immune systems, or maybe we're grieving, and emotional energy is still physical energy. And actually, as we start valuing ourselves, we're able to kind of just tune into how those needs and how we might meet them may well look different every day. And what worked last week might not be quite right this week, but it doesn't mean that all is lost. Maybe the more we tend to ourselves and hear ourselves, the more quickly we will be resourced again to be able to step into the patterns that we really enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. It's just that listening to what your body's
Yeah.
telling you. And it's that fear then of becoming ill-disciplined and inconsistent because you are X, Y, and Z. And it's just that relearning those patterns that if you are disciplined, it's quite difficult to say, well, it's actually all right that I'm not getting up this morning at this time and I'm going to read or whatever that is. I had it the other day. I woke up for my morning run and I'm usually ready to go and I just really didn't want to do it. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it because I said I was going to do it. And that's the kind of person I want to be. And then I went for my run. I came back and I thought, oh gosh, I really wasn't as fast as I usually am. That's so strange. And then I thought, well, I woke up and I was exhausted and I didn't want to go. And it really links into that's your body telling you. Like, that is literally the only signs they can give. And if you ignore those signs long enough, you'll end up with something a lot more severe, a
Yeah.
lot larger of a warning sign. And how else do you expect your body to communicate with you? It's not going to send you, a lovely text message in the morning. And I guess that's where there's lots of tracking devices that come into it. But the biggest tracking device is your body telling you and your brain connection what you're feeling.
Yeah, and I think we can, because to be honest, if I'd asked myself, a few years ago, what do I need this morning? I honestly wouldn't have been able to know. Like, what might be what might be self-care one day might be self-sabotage the next day. And sometimes it's so hard to determine what that is, but it is that case of just gently nudging the comfort zone sometimes, but just allowing ourselves to retreat into it. And I think the more we know and value and respect ourselves, the more natural discipline we find in being able to reach for the state of wellness, right? Because we want to be well. But I think so many of the people that I work with that are struggling so much to put in good habits, and they know what they want to do, but they just seem to sabotage it, or they just seem to, it just always falls by the wayside, and they have so much frustration and self-criticism and guilt around that. Is that actually what we often find out when you strip back the layers? Do they truly believe that they are deserving of the positive change that this new habit will bring about? And often, when we do that exploration, we find out that no, they don't believe that they are really deserving of wellness, of that happiness, of that. And it's sometimes it is a case of just stripping it back and thinking, are you drinking enough water? Are you taking the medication that you need to be taking? Are you nourishing yourself in the way that you're eating? Are you going to bed when you're tired? And I think sometimes it's about stripping it back and thinking, let's look at the basics. Because even to drink, when I was struggling with the kind of self-worth and self-esteem, I wouldn't some days I just wouldn't even drink water. It was this kind of act of self-sabotage, and like this gentle act of kind of just harming myself, really, because underneath it all, I did not believe I deserved to feel hydrated. So sometimes we really need to strip it back and think, why are these plans? Why is it not working? Why can't I keep them? Why am I sabotaging them? But actually, maybe you need to start really nurturing that sense of worth in the basic foundational things first, and then just build on those.
Yeah, I saw a quote that you said it was your worth never changed, your awareness of it did. It's been there the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's that recentering of, okay, who am I? Not what am I doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And how are you speaking to yourself? This is so very critical. The most important conversation that you will ever have in your entire life is the one that goes on in the silence of your mind. And if that is critical, if it is bullying, sometimes even abusive, the clients I work with and in my own life historically, surely it's very hard to think, you know what, I'm going to go and eat a beautiful, nourishing salad instead of just binging on a bag of Haribo from the back of the cupboard. It's really hard to make that decision if I'm already criticizing and bullying myself from the inside out. It's a very big stretch to do something lovely and intentional when that narrative is just constantly saying that I'm a failure. It's constantly saying that I should be trying harder and doing more and that I'm not enough.
Interesting choice of the word bullying there, because
Mm.
that suddenly is, whew, okay, that comes with a lot of connotations. Is
Yeah.
that kind of the view that you would put on a lot of this self dialogue?
Hmm. Yeah, because if we externalize that, and if I was to speak to I've got 3 young children, if I was to speak to one of my kids in the way that I spoke to myself in the past, if I was to get something wrong, for goodness sake, what is wrong with you? If you've got where are your brain cells? Why are you always doing this? You shouldn't have this job. They're going to find you out. It's this. What would that sound like? Would I want someone to speak to my child in that way? What would it do to their confidence and self-esteem and sense of deservedness and acceptance? You know, it would just erode it. I would never speak to my children in the way that I've spoken to myself in the past. And the most powerful thing, and this is what I love about this work and what I love about being a therapist, is that you can change that. You can change that. And from there, if you're struggling with self-worth, start there, start thinking, start just listening to yourself and thinking, what would someone who cared about me say back to that? Or what would I say to someone who I care about? And what would I say to one of my kids if you've got them? And suddenly it just makes it a very powerful statement of how important that inner dialogue is.
Yeah. If we saw a transcript of our inner dialogue in our inner thoughts, it would be quite shocking and probably not
Totally.
very PG actually.
Mm.
It can be quite severe, it can be quite nasty, but it's so subconscious. You really have to tune into it, because I think a lot of us probably don't even realize that we're beating ourselves up because we couldn't park in that parking space, and oh my goodness, this is ridiculous, and da da da, or whatever it is, like such silly things
Yeah.
that, I forgot my shopping bags and I'm gonna have to spend 30p on a shopping bag, and it's just the end of the world, and all of these little things. And then of course more serious ones as well. And it can really get that momentum. And another thing I was wondering if we could kind of touch on was burnout. You mentioned it slightly earlier, but where does that link in with self-worth? Where does it come from? Because everyone knows what
Mm.
burnout is, but what actually is burnout?
Yeah, so burnout is basically when your body just says nope and your brain just says nope. And it's normally people that have lived in this cycle of living at 100 miles an hour, crashing into a heap, picking themselves up, living at 100 miles an hour, crashing into a heap. And for me, that would look like just applying myself 110% to everything. And then on a Sunday, I would literally just be a wreck, like a wreck. That's how it would look, in my younger years. And I think it's normally fueled by things like people pleasing and perfectionism. It's basically living beyond that limit, chronically. When you know that your body is saying, I can't do this, when you know that your brain is saying, I don't have capacity, when you know that your diary is saying, we can't put it in, and you're like, I don't care, we're doing it because we can in a way, but it comes at a cost. It's like, if I was to drive my car all the time with my foot flat down on the accelerator, like bad things would happen. Like that is only meant for certain times to get you out of a pickle. And the same thing with us running at and living at like full pelt. It was only meant to really be called upon when we really, really need it for a short period of time. And I think we're so overwhelmed and overstimulated, and we don't have boundaries between work and home and life admin and emails, and everything is just so merged together that we don't get the rest that we need, the psychological rest, the emotional rest, and the physical rest. And we have to put boundaries in, which require discipline, which requires energy. So it becomes this spiral of just absolute chronic and constant depletion. And then burnout gets you to this place of you just can't anymore. And then like true burnout, nervous system burnout. And this, I went through this after the pandemic, and it was the most humbling experience for me because I could not do work. I could not function. I could not make decisions. I could not. All I wanted to do was lie down and stare at the back of the sofa. And this went on for weeks and then impacted me for months, and probably for at least 18 months. I had to change my life. I had to respect that I needed people. I needed rest. I needed gentleness. I needed support, and all of these things that we just need as humans. But we seem to sometimes, get into that rut of thinking that it's somehow a failure, or it just shows that we're not working hard enough, we're not strong enough, or we're not efficient enough, or we're not resilient enough. When actually we're just, we can't do it all. End of story. It's not failure.
Do you think it comes from like the psychological relentlessness, or physically just having too many things in, or emotionally and mentally not actually switching off? Is there
Yeah.
kind of one big trigger, or is it an
It's
accumulation?
all of those things. And I think that's the hard thing about it, is that, when we're in burnout, we need to reassess all of the different systems in our lives. We need to look at, emotionally, where am I putting out? Are we actually just expending a ton of emotion on social media, feeling heartbreak over stories that people are sharing that we don't even know? Are we, and often this is the way that I think the ways that we think we are resting, we're actually further exhausting ourselves. So when we're on social media and we think, oh, I'm resting, I'm like horizontal and I'm just tapping around on my phone, isn't this lovely? Is that what we don't realize is two things that are exhausting in that moment. One is our nervous system is poised because we do not know whether we're going to see someone's traumatic story or a funny dog video. that will have us laughing. So we're literally kind of braced because we do not know what we're going to see next. And the second reason it's exhausting is that our brain has to process all of that stuff, like having a massive Sunday lunch. We just eat all that amazing food, and then afterwards your body's got to process it all, right? It's got to work through it all, and we feel the weight of that. We feel it. And it's the same when we're consuming a huge amounts of information, more than any generation before us, in such a short amount of time. Our brain has to process what if this is useful, where do I store this, what do I do with it? And it's a big call on our resources. And then another reason it kind of takes away is that often it takes away from connection, relationships, right? And they are giving to us. Relationships give to us. They give us oxytocin, which is the hormone that is the antidote to cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So we need relationships. And I think what we're doing is we're spending all our social energy on little interactions and little insights into people's lives. And we're kind of frittering it away. So when we have a good mate that goes, do you want to come out? We're like, nah, I've got nothing left. So I don't think we realize how much, even in the ways that we're choosing to rest, we're being robbed of exactly what we need. And we're actually, being even more depleted. So I think it's becoming mindful of just how much we're using all the time.
It's a very sneaky system, isn't it? The social media that ticks off enough of the social cues, the social requirements of friendship, of dopamine, of laughing, of feeling sad, of feeling excited because these influencers you don't know got engaged, and oh my gosh, and you have this kind of connection with all of these people that don't know you, but it actually is that surface level where you neglect everything else, just as you say, because they don't know you. They're not asking you how you are, and there's not any of that. Like, if you put all your time into online friendships or online kind of following people and keeping up with their lives, suddenly you're having a really, really tough time. And who do you speak to? Do you think with that there's been a rise in the demand for therapy because people don't feel as heard as they have previously?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the therapy world about Chat GPT therapy. People just seeking therapy through Chat GPT because it's immediate and it's normally fairly kind and supportive and quick to respond. But there are lots of ethical challenges with that, but it just
What are they?
shows
What are the challenges?
just the fact that Chat GPT doesn't know you. It doesn't know your kind of your medical history. It doesn't know the nuances. It's not looking at your body language. It's not, it's often a bit of an echo chamber where it kind of just feeds back what it knows you want to hear. And I'm sure it feels very soothing to people, but it's missing out on a lot of nuance of the human connection, which is really what we're craving. We just want to feel. We have a very deep human need to feel seen, right? And we're seen by so many people. You can put up a post that will be seen by tens of thousands of people, but that's so surface level. We end up feeling like a bit of an imposter in our own lives, in the sense that people are seeing a version of us, or they're seeing this kind of external part, but actually, what about the bit of you that just feels like you can't? What about the bit of you that is scared? What about the bit of you that is anxious? What about the bit of you that is just lonely? No one's seeing that. So that gap between what we're showing the world and what we actually know is going on inside of us becomes bigger and bigger. And that's why there's like a loneliness epidemic. We've never been so connected, so many people ever, but we've never been so disconnected from ourselves and from people to the depth that we need to feel seen and valued and accepted. And I think, I've got an anchor tattooed on my wrist, and it's this little reminder that, doing so much work online, it's so easy to just be pulled into opinion, pulled into kind of being accepted by what people think. And it's this anchor that just reminds me that I am loved by those people who know me most, those people that see my dark corners and my rough edges and see my toxic traits, because we all have them. And people that see me on my bad days and in my wobbly moments and, all of that, and they love me and they accept me. But I can only really anchor myself in that if I allow that to happen, if I nurture those relationships, if I allow myself to feel seen. And that's like a muscle, right? And if we're not exercising that muscle, it's so much easier just to keep, I guess, looking at the outside of everyone else's lives and showing the outside of yours and just connecting on that level.
The loneliness epidemic is something I'd like to tap into a little bit more because, as you say, in this digital age, everyone we went to school with, we probably know where they live, what they're doing,
Yeah.
what their relationship status is, where they went on holiday last year. The format of friendships is so different. Did they do a post on your birthday? Did they like your Instagram post? Or how many likes do you have? Or why did I get more likes on this one and not that many on this one? Even posting a selfie is basically putting your face out there to say who likes this photo. And if they don't like it, does that mean they don't like how you look? It's a very strange thing that if you read into it too much, you can come up with a lot of quite frightening scenarios. Or even the instant messaging seen. Why haven't they replied? Are they busy? Or do they not like my tone? Are they
So
thinking in this way?
exhausting, isn't it?
No.
It's
But
exhausting, even just, yeah.
when we write it, like, this is what social media
Mm,
is, it sounds crazy, and just as you say, you're like, "What? That sounds ridiculous," but that is
yeah.
what it is. It's so bizarre. So no wonder we're all so lonely. So what happens then? What are people coming to you saying? What do you say when they come in and they say, "I'm so lonely"?
Mm. I think in all of those examples, if we do not know our worth, if we do not accept ourselves, we will be looking for everyone else around us to tell us what we're worth, to tell us what makes us acceptable. And I think, that's what people are coming in, is just like, that's just what they don't feel in and of themselves acceptable in their, slobby clothes at home doing nothing. They have to do all of these things, be all of these things, seem all of these ways, and it's exhausting. That list is just absolutely exhausting. So I think, to be able to, the antidote to loneliness is to feel seen. And I always say you need 2 or 3 people in your life who see you, who know you. And what that does is, when you have these people that see the worst of you, who see those dark corners and rough edges, and they accept you, you can just start giving that far more power than a stranger on the internet that doesn't even know the nuances of your personality or what you've been through or why you might have seemed grumpy that day. They just don't know. It just, how are we giving them so much power? But if we are not anchored in the fact that we have those 2 or 3 people in our lives who see the worst of us and accept and love us regardless, we're going to give that power elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And how frightening a thought of
Yeah.
outsourcing everything that we were, to Chat GPT or to Instagram or wherever we're spending our time. Really,
Mm,
it's a frightening thought. Um,
yeah. It is. My friend, she has an interiors account and she is renovating a little house in Cornwall, and she asked Chat GPT to roast her photograph of this, I think it was bathroom or something that she'd done. It was beautiful, beautiful, right? And Chat GPT absolutely pulled it to bits, hilariously tore it apart, like the funniest quips. You just think it's a machine, right? It's digital. You could get it to just encourage you and do all these things, but equally you could ask it to completely take it. I could ask it to tear me apart, and it would go online and find my work and completely tear it in shreds. But it could also really help me. So it doesn't know you. It doesn't really care. It doesn't care for your heart, your soul. It's just digital.
it's frightening. Yeah, it's not a friend. It's like the most two-faced thing you could
Mm,
possibly imagine, without any loyalty to you at all. Isn't that kind of what friendships are? If someone is slandering you behind your back, you would expect, if your friend was there, to stand up or give you accountability. The foundations of friendships, love, support, accountability, loyalty, that none of the Chat GPT or the digital profiles who we
yeah.
believe we're friends with or whatever it is, it's that eye contact, the physical, giving someone a hug when you see them, or just that feeling heard, I guess. It's
Yeah.
interesting how we're in such an advanced world and society. We can literally work from anywhere. We can even make money from things that our grandparents wouldn't have even dreamt that you can even do.
Mm.
Yet, we're in this state of flux, of overwhelm, of burnout, of vicious cycles, of low self esteem. Is it worse than it was? Or are we more aware of it? What is this kind of thing? It seems relentless.
I think it's made everything possible, and we're the ones that have to put the walls in. It's taken all the walls down. No, you don't have to be. I remember working office. I remember being in an office with a computer, and you'd walk away at the end of the day, and then you'd come back in the morning and you'd sit down to work. That is just like, it feels archaic now. And also, my mum's generation, if you were friends with someone at university and then you moved to a different town, you might have their phone number and you may or may not call them. And it's the same. Like, you could be sitting on the sofa doing work emails in the time that you need to rest. There are no boundaries. All of this, the freedom, the way we're free is like we take away the boundaries, right? We take away the rules, and it's the digital world has taken those things away, and it's up to us to put them in. It's up to us to put them in, but we have to do it powerfully, right? I don't want to answer emails when I'm cooking my kids' dinner, because I know that suddenly they are an annoyance to what I'm trying to do. So one minute I'm having a laugh with them, I'm talking to them. The next minute I'm on my phone and I'm like wishing they were being quiet. It's such a jarring thing. They don't know what's going on. Is mummy here, or she's still there, but she's not here? I don't know. And so it's up to us to put the boundaries in, and we have to do it firmly, right? Because this is there to and designed to keep us there. It's designed to keep us coming back. So it's not enough for me to think I am not going on the phone between the hours of 4 and 7:30, right? It's not enough. I can say that, I can mean that, I can want that, but in the moment when I've got no impulse control because I'm hormonal or I'm tired, or I will just find myself on my email because that makes me feel purposeful. It makes me feel productive. And sometimes parenting doesn't give me that feeling because it's just sometimes quite stressful and overwhelming, right? So I have apps, an app called App Block, that literally does not let me go on my email or my Instagram, will not let me. Like, there's no workaround. I cannot do it. And it's life changing, because I think freedom is great. But actually, without boundaries, we feel quite unsafe. We feel free, but we don't feel safe. When we see this, boundaries are there to keep us safe. They're there so that we can have our needs met. They're there so that we can tend to ourselves. So, yeah, freedom is great because we can have flexibility, but we're only going to be well if we can put the walls in somewhere.
And with the traditional role, as families may have been set up, of one person went out to work, often the man, the woman would stay at home and look after the children, run the household, and so on. Yet now everything's changed and anyone can do anything, which is really amazing in many, many ways. But now cost of living is so high, kind of both people need to go out and work.
Mm.
And it's become less of an opportunity and choice of who wants to do that, and actually where would you like to spend your life? Who would you like to raise the children? Do we want to have children? That sort of thing. To now becoming this frantic juggling act of trying to keep everything together, which now women often are at home with the children because they are the people who give birth to the children and feed the children for a period of time and also recover from that. But then they also may need to work and build a career, and then there's that pressure of, we have this opportunity to do that, so what do you mean you're not going to go out and work? What do you mean all of this? Or I have a really high mortgage because housing prices are so high, so I actually have to do that. Or I'm a single parent. And it all juggles on. That this traditional format, which was flawed in some ways, in many ways, but now we have the freedom of everything. Yet people aren't that much happier. People aren't that much more fulfilled. We aren't living our lives in this freedom. If anything, we have less freedom than we did when we had to do this.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I think what we've lost, what was, when you have more defined roles, you have clarity. And there's something about clarity that we know what we're doing. We know whether we've done a good job of that or not. We know what's expected of us, and there's clarity. There's something around clarity and predictability that makes us feel safe. Right. And I think what so much has changed, the landscape of work, the landscape of parenting, the landscape of different roles in the home has completely changed. But what we need to be doing is having the conversation. And this is where self-worth comes back into it, right? If I'm feeling resentful because I'm always doing A, and I wish my husband did more of this, but I'm not saying anything about it. We're not able to reassess some of those roles. We need to be having open dialogue and conversation, because if we're kind of pushing again, kind of moving into burnout, pushing beyond the limits of our resources, um, we need to be saying that circumstances have changed. We need to relook at these roles. We need to look at the different division. We just need to be talking to each other. Otherwise, if we're not, and we're carrying resentment, and this is often what happens to people pleasing, where it's often what happens in when we just do what we always do because we feel like we should, and we've never really questioned it, is that we start doing it resentfully, or it costs us a lot, or it is breaking us. That starts eroding connection, right? Because we're feeling really unseen, we're feeling unheard, we're feeling resentful, we're feeling like we're carrying more than our fair share. And we start reading stories into that. We write stories about the things that we don't know because we like certainty. So I might think, he doesn't care that I'm doing this. He's just waltzing off to work. And we start writing these stories, and then we start acting off the back of them. And it all just gets really confusing. So this is where honesty and self-esteem is being able to say, you know what, we need to talk about this because I'm not okay. This is too much. How can we relook at this together? So it's about having open dialogue about the limits of your resources. And again, when the more you respect yourself, the more you're able to see when you're just continuously pushing past them, and you want more for yourself. You don't want to live like a frazzled mess. It's not nice or pleasant for yourself or anyone around you. So it's conversation and connection, so we can live without this kind of simmering resentment underneath, and just feeling unseen and unheard by the people, but also by ourselves.
It's quite interesting how you say that if we have a situation that's not addressed, then we come up with a story or a reason or some sort of reasoning that will be why, because in our brains we don't like that open loop. This is why we hate a cliffhanger or a book that doesn't give us an ending. It really annoys us, and we must click next episode, because what happens, like, do they find her? Do they not? Does she just disappear? Like, it's that horrible thing that even bits and books are, no cliffhanger. It's advertised as a good thing, because when we have that open loop, it just goes round and round and we can't close it off. Therefore, well, this didn't happen and I don't know why. So I'm going to come up with an answer because I've not addressed it and I've not had that. So I need to close this loop in some way. So I'm going to come up with this story, which may be accurate, probably isn't that positive. And then, as you say, it goes more and more. And it's that saying of things under the carpet. And if you just imagine this carpet gets higher and higher, and suddenly you're both kind of
start tripping over it, like it's squidging out sideways. It's just,
you're a frazzled mess, as you said.
no one's feeling honoured and no one's feeling seen. And there's just irritability and snarky comments and just hurt, really, because we feel hurt and we feel unseen. A lot of the reason we feel unseen is because we haven't found the words to articulate it, or because we haven't been able to acknowledge how valuable that is for ourselves and how
Or we don't feel
deserve to
worth.
feel heard. Yeah.
Maybe we don't feel worth actually pointing it out because we think we deserve that action if it was a poor action or something. Maybe that links into it as well. There's so many different ramifications. But then if someone says, right, okay, Anna, I need help. I need a fresh start. I need to spring clean my life. I'm going to move somewhere else. I'm going to do something. How do I restart? How do I start over? What do you say?
So I think two things. One is looking at your internal dialogue and thinking, how can I, like, if I catch myself saying, for goodness sake, what's wrong with you? Just think, okay, what would a mate say to me right now? She'd be like, you're absolutely frazzled. Of course you're going to drop some ball at some point. Anyone can only juggle so much. Just think of that kinder, more grounded internal dialogue that feels so much more supportive, and just say it to yourself, and you feel like an absolute muppet, and it feels really exhausting because it has to be so intentional for a while. But the most amazing thing, and this is the beauty of neuroplasticity, this is the beauty of repetition, is that in time, that more compassionate, grounded voice will gain volume. And I think people can argue, but it's that internal critic that gets me striving and driving. And, if you thought about two teachers, right, when you were a kid, and you had one teacher that was just terrifying and shouted all the time, and everyone was really good and they got really good grades, right? Because they were absolutely terrified of getting shouted at and shamed in front of everyone. And then you had the teacher next door that never shouted, but you knew that if you did something wrong, they'd come and they'd talk to you and they'd work it out, and they'd say, "Oh, it's hard when you're learning," and they also got good grades too. And it's like, which one would you rather have? A kind and compassionate internal dialogue is like a cheerleader, coaching you along the way. I'd rather that than someone with a stick beating me up for every single thing. And we can get to good places with a good dialogue. Like, we really can. We'll get there much happier. So work on your internal dialogue. Second thing I would say is start noticing what you're not saying. And it's not a challenge to say it from the off. But if you're in a conversation with a mate and they say something, it just doesn't sit well with you, and you feel uncomfortable, maybe you feel a bit hurt, just start noticing what you're not saying. I am not saying, "Oh, that didn't sit well with me. Can we talk about it?" It might be that I don't know, you need something, or you want something, or you need some support. And it's kind of like you feel that come up in you that, "Oh, I really want to ask them if they can just take that project off my plate at work a little bit because it's just too much," but you don't want to. So you internalize that. And then so when you start noticing what you're not saying, expressing, sharing, asking for, it starts presenting you with choices, and you start thinking, actually, what would it be like for me to ask that, to share that, to say that? And then in time, you will just notice little opportunities to try that out. And the best thing is that it just develops your confidence. It helps you realize that people can withstand your boundaries. It helps you realize that, yes, some people will misunderstand you. Some people say and do the wrong thing. But actually, a lot of the people in your life will respect, honor, and accommodate for you being a person with needs and feelings and all of that. It's
Mm-hmm.
empowering.
Exactly. It's changing that narrative once again of it's empowering, it's not a negative thing. And
Mm.
just before we kind of close off, you mentioned that your experience with burnout after the pandemic.
Mm.
What should people do to get out of burnout? What's your advice? What's your personal experience? Because the thought of stopping is probably terrifying
Oh,
because of
yeah.
the reason that they have got into the whole burnout situation.
Yeah, yeah. It was really, really, really humbling, because I think what it made me do is realize that I needed rest. I think I used to see rest, and this is what often I see with clients, is rest is an indulgent. It's an indulgence. It's selfish, or it's something that I have to earn. When actually, fundamentally, you need rest. You need proper rest, and you need to embrace boredom. And I think this is why the kind of high dopamine society that we live in, where everything is kind of activating and immediate, and actually it's just wired us. It's just wired us. We're wired, so it's really hard to slow down. So we need to find ways to welcome and embrace slowness and boredom. Read a book instead of going on your phone. Go for a walk instead of doing a high intensity workout someday if you're feeling dysregulated. Think about those things that feel soothing. Think about those things that feel nourishing. You have pushed beyond those limits too long. How can you start to respect them? What would that look like? And you need people. Like, recovery from burnout is a collective thing. There will be areas of your life that have been benefiting from you burning yourself into the ground. So actually, it's, how can I readjust that relationship at work, or that workload, or how can I make this more sustainable? Because it's a high cost. It's a real high cost when you're feeling overwhelmed. It's your joy. It's your ability to rationalize some of those anxious thoughts. It's your ability to lean into rest and just enjoy some of the relationships and the good things in your life. Like, it has a real high cost when you are just living too hard and too fast. And yeah, it's just thinking in all those areas, how can I take into account my humanness, my limits?
Mm-hmm. And it is quite an interesting one. A lot of high performers
Mm.
will be motivated by something quite negative. maybe a parent figure who didn't approve of them or what they were doing, or didn't think they were good enough, or a teacher, or even someone who they might not be able to put their finger on it, but is actually, their next door neighbor's friend who was over and said, oh, this, that. It can be someone really random. Can be motivated by that voice of, you aren't good enough, you aren't going to be able to achieve that. Therefore, that motivation of running away from that failure, that perceived failure, is so strong that it can really push you quite far. But I guess it's kind of bringing that back in-house and saying, hold on, it actually doesn't matter what they think, because it matters about what I think and what I perceive my worth is. And it's quite frightening then, because when you do take the metaphorical foot off the gas and you stop, then all these things you were running away from catch up with you and flood over you. And it's probably quite a really painful process, mentally, emotionally, and a point when actually you're in a pretty bad place because you're burnt out. You've stopped, you've stumbled, you've fallen, you're tired, you're exhausted. You probably don't feel like the best version of yourself, being in the moment that you are now realizing you have this burnout, you're vulnerable, and then you have to face all of this. Who actually am I? And who's my worth from? And why was I trying to please this person who once said this throwaway comment, who probably doesn't even remember that conversation, or maybe even me? It's pretty crazy when you kind of redo that script of it all. And with that, I want to ask you, what does success look like to you? How do you perceive success in your life?
Oh, this is so good. I perceive, and this will have changed so many times over the years, but for me, success is feeling like I can be myself, feeling like I can honor myself in my work, honor my limits and what I'm saying yes to and no to, honor my relationships, my family, my children, and where I'm placing my boundaries. So, yeah, I think it's just being able to honor who I am in the different areas of life and the roles that I have, and being able to do that well. That's what success looks like to me. And that will look very different on the outside depending on what seasons of life we're in. It's going to look different when my kids are older to what it looks like now. And yeah, and knowing that actually my worth isn't tied to any of that. Whatever I'm doing on the outside work and how that looks like, at the end of the day, am I honoring who I am and what I have to give in how I'm living my life right now?
Awesome. And if people want to work with you, Anna, follow you online, get your books, where should they go?
So just go to just Anna Mathur on Instagram. That's where everything comes from. So it's all there, and you can find me there or drop me a message. And yeah,
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
thanks for having me.